word manners, what comes to mind? For me, what comes to mind is that old school parenting method where children are meant to be seen and not heard. And honestly, it leaves an icky taste in my mouth. I want my kids to be polite. I want them to say please. I want them to say thank you. I want them to be patient. I want them to apologize when they hurt someone, but I don't want to force them into an apology. I want them to feel apologetic. How do we do that as parents? It is by building empathy from the inside out. We don't want our kids to listen just because they're getting a treat or just because they're scared of getting yelled at or hit. We want it to happen intrinsically from within. So how in the world do we do that? Well, thankfully, this week I scoured the internet because, this is Mommy Breakdown where I break it down so you don't have a breakdown. You want your kids to learn manners. I came up with 10 different activities that were inspired by things I found out. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing we did this week is watch the movie Inside Out. If you haven't seen this movie, oh my gosh, get your tissue box ready if you're anything like me, because I tend to cry more in movies. Do you guys cry more now that you're a parent? I feel like I'm way more emotional than I used to be, and I was already emotional. So get the tissues ready if that's you. Because in this movie, the main character, Riley, she ends up moving when she's 11, and she goes from being this joyful little girl to suddenly feeling these big feelings of sadness and anger and fear and disgust, and she struggles with these big emotions. Now, when my children were watching the movie, their first instinct was that you should always feel happy, and if you don't feel happy, there's something wrong. But as the movie progresses, Riley decides to run away from home. And of course, I thought to myself, oh gosh, are my kids getting inspired on how to run away? And as Riley runs away, sadness comes in and she starts to miss her family. And by feeling sadness, she ends up going back. Number 2, after they are done watching Inside Out, I want you to gather some construction paper and just cut out a heart. You can have them write their name on it. They can draw on the heart. They could decorate the heart. Just make sure that you tell your child ahead of time that the heart will get ruined. After they're done with their hearts, you can have each of the children exchange hearts. If you only have one child, you can exchange your heart with them. And then I want you to tell your children to crumple up the heart. And then give it back to the other person. So now they're back with their own heart. Ask them to open it up. So sad. Is this heart ever going to look like this heart again? And your children will probably say, no, it's ruined, Mommy. It doesn't look the same. So we can apologize, but apologies don't take away what happens. This is extremely important if you have a young child who they're at that stage where they're doing those apologies that you're telling them to do, and they think just because they apologize that it made it all better. Number 3, at this point, your kids might be getting a little wiggly, so you're going to want to do some kind of activity that involves movement. That's an awesome tip. Just side note, if your children are getting wiggly, do a wiggly activity. Have you guys heard of the game Mother May I? This is a twist on Mother May I. You are going to be practicing the words please and thank you using Mother May I. So you will be the mother, you will stand at one end of the room, and then your kids stand at the other end, and they say, Mother, may I take 2 steps forward, please? And then you say, yes, you may. And then they take the 2 steps forward, and then they have to say, thank you. Or they go back. And then you keep going until one of them reaches you. You can do bunny hops, you could do dinosaur stomps, whatever they want to ask for. Number 4, an obstacle course. If you missed my video last week, I did an entire video using painter's tape. You could also use electrical tape. My daughter made this obstacle course, which of course kept her busy as the older child. She even made little hearts with the electrical tape. And the point of doing an obstacle course is to practice taking turns. So one person went through the obstacle course and then the other person had to wait until it was their turn. Number 5, my kids were pretty wiped out at this point because we were running around doing the obstacle course. So it was time to sit down for a little tea party. Tea parties are a creative way to teach table manners. We cut up some flowers that we had left over from the 4th of July. And my son was pretty adorable. He was saying how it was going to be a romantic dinner. And my daughter was like, no, it's not. And then he wanted to set the table. We talked about how when you have a guest, you serve them first and you offer other people the tea first. This led to some very silly, fun learning where we were doing the opposite of manners. My son was saying, well, you wouldn't do this, eat it like this raw. Number 6, this Sophie book. If you're not familiar with Conscious Discipline, it's one of the many programs to teach gentle parenting, and I read this book to my kids. Number 7, charades. Act out manners. Here is a list of all of the different types of manners that you can do by acting them out. My kids thought it was hilarious when I pretended to pass gas and then I said, excuse me, or I sneezed and I acted like the snot went everywhere, and then I learned how to put it in my elbow, or I excused myself, or I bumped into somebody and then I picked them up. The more silly, the better. Which leads me to number 8, which is Pictionary. If you don't want to act it out, instead you can draw it. Number 9, put on a play. Think of the skill that you want your child to learn. Maybe it's phone etiquette. Maybe it's game etiquette with saying good job and not being a poor sport. Act it out. Phone etiquette would be you're not going to be looking at your phone while I'm talking to you. So you'll act it out, and they love it. When you, as the adult, are the child who's being rude, they find that hilarious. So you'll be on the phone and be like, "Ma," ignoring them. Or when they're talking, be like, talk to me, talk to me. And then I'm just going to like scroll through my phone. Be like, Mommy, you're so rude. Ugh, I don't care. Final activity number 10.
Experiment time. You are going to need 3 things: a bowl of water, some pepper, and soap later. The pepper is going to represent germs. When your kid sneezes and coughs, you'll explain how there's little tiny particles that go into the air and that get stuck to people. You can see my son even sticks his hand into the pepper bowl to show how the germs stick to you. But when you wash your hands, that gets rid of the germs. Watch what happens. Ooh, ooh. Again.
I hope one of these 10 activities help you this week. I'll see you next time. Bye.